She's fantastic. I know she is. But I don't think her doing it.
Did you tell him? Did you tell her? I was really head strong and then I found it. No, wait, no, I didn't.
This thing's huge.
It is. This is about it. I like it a lot. Got a few choruses here tonight. We're going to start with "We Have Come Into His House." Hi, Jerry. Good to see Jerry tonight. Hey, we're going to do He Has Made Me Glad. It's one of the psalms that we sing. Next week, I get to lead the worship time, and Allison will help me a little bit. We'll sing some more scripture songs right out of the book of Psalms, but this is one of those. I think it's Psalm 100. He has made me glad. sing that one, you got to remind your face. Sing this one through twice, this wonderful old chorus. Every day with Jesus is sweeter than the day before. Every day with Jesus, I love Him more and more. Jesus saves and keeps me. It didn't work out too well at church. Thank you, darling. You're fantastic. Well, again, welcome to worship on Wednesday. Good to see you all. And everybody who's watching at home, watching later. The book of Psalms, obviously, it's the workbook on worship. Tonight we're going to cover 5 Psalms of David, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29. They're all relatively brief. And I think we can do that in the time allotted and do justice to these particular Psalms. Again, about half the Psalms written by David, and many of them are just psalms or prayers. And these would fall into that category. Psalm 25 is a psalm of deliverance and forgiveness. That's important. Now, there's no title, no superscription that gives us a historical reference, but most good biblical scholars believe that this psalm was written with the backdrop of the Absalom incident. Remember, we talked about that earlier in our study. I believe it was Psalm 3, but I could be wrong about that. But David is a 60-ish king. He's been on the throne for 30 plus years. And Absalom, his son, is trying to usurp the throne. Very difficult time for David in many different respects. But as I said, this psalm is a psalm of deliverance and forgiveness. David realizes that he needs God to deliver him. He's not going to defend himself against Absalom. In fact, he's going to leave town. He's going to go live in the cave or wherever he can find a place to go. He did that once when he was a young guy, and Saul was after him. And in that instance, David was completely innocent. And he had opportunities to take Saul out, but he refused. And he allowed God to do God's things in God's way. It's a very difficult, excruciating time during his 20s, but it helped David become who David was. The trials we go through, the difficulties, the things we don't understand, God's using those, of course, to shape us in ways that nothing else can and nothing else will. But this psalm is different. This is Absalom. And David realizes when he writes this psalm, when he sings this song, that he has some part to play in the whole incident. If you remember, Absalom, his brother, and Tamar, his sister, and all that went on back when they were younger, and David didn't do anything when there was this family incident. Absalom's sister, Tamar, full sister, raped by Amnon, her half-brother. And Absalom had this rage about it. In fact, he killed his brother and went on the run for a while. But David was sort of a detached dad. He didn't really step up and do some things that maybe a dad should do in a situation like that. And I'm not condemning David, because sometimes we get into situations where we just don't really know what to do. We know we should do something, but because we don't know what to do or how to do it, we don't do anything, and that's on us. And so when David prays for deliverance, he's asking God to help him with this Absalom thing. But when he asks for forgiveness, he's acknowledging his guilt and his lapse in the home. So there's consequences in this psalm, not to David's actions, but to his inactions, his lack of action. And that's what he's talking about, and I'll point a couple of those out. So let's just work through it quickly. Verses 1 through 3, he says, "Protect me, Lord. Unto thee, O Lord, do I lift up my soul. O my God, I trust in thee. Let me not be ashamed." He's going to use the word ashamed 4 times. And of course, many times when we do not respond as we should, we feel shame. We feel ashamed that we weren't able. You know, kind of like Peter when the Lord said, "You're going to deny me 3 times." And Peter said, "No way, I'll die for you." Well, we know what happened that night. And then Peter was ashamed. And sometimes we find ourselves in a position like that. That's where David is. He said, I trust in thee. Let me not be ashamed. Let not mine enemies triumph over me. Let none that wait on thee be ashamed. But let them be ashamed which transgress without cause. So he says, Lord, protect me. And then verse 4 and 5, teach me. Now this is the teachable spirit of David. Again, he's the king. He has no rivals. Absalom's trying to take him out. But many years earlier is the root that now bears the fruit. And yet David is humble. He's open. This is David, the man after God's own heart. David always had this teachable spirit. He says, show me your ways, O Lord. Teach me your paths. Lead me in your truth and teach me. For you are the God of my salvation. On thee do I wait all the day. So protect me, teach me. Verse 6 and 7, pardon me. Remember, O Lord, your tender mercies and your loving kindnesses. What a beautiful Hebrew word that is. For they have been ever of old. Remember not the sins of my youth, or when I was a young man. It didn't mean I was a teenager. Remember not the sins of my earlier days, nor my transgressions. According to your mercy, remember you me for your goodness' sake, O Lord. Now remember mercy, number one prayer in the Bible. Men ask for mercy more than anything else when they're praying to God. And we usually ask for mercy when we realize there's nothing else. If God's not merciful to me here, I don't deserve it, I can't earn it, but please, Lord, be merciful to me, be gracious to me. And so he's praying for a pardon. And then verses 8 through 11, prepare me. Good and upright is the Lord. Therefore will he teach, there's that word again, sinners in the way, that is the way they should go. The meek or the humble, the contrite, the repentant, we might say, will he guide in judgment, and the meek will he teach his ways. Now, that's the fourth time he's asked to be taught something. All the paths of the Lord are mercy and truth to such as keep his covenant and his testimonies. For thy name's sake, O Lord, pardon mine iniquity, for it is great. I want you to get that. David's not just saying, deliver me from Absalom, deliver me from my enemies, deliver me from this situation, put me back on the throne, I'm the king. There's no demands here, but there's also this sense of, I'm guilty. I have a part to play in everything that's going on in my life right now. I'm not without fault. So pardon my iniquity, for it is great. And then finally, the biggest part of the psalm, verses 12 through 21, he asks for God to prosper me or to bless me. What man is he that fears the Lord? Him shall he teach in the way that he shall choose. His soul shall dwell at ease, and his seed shall inherit the earth. The secret of the Lord is with them that fear him, and he will show them his covenant. My eyes are ever toward the Lord, for he shall pluck my feet out of the net. Turn thee unto me, and have mercy, there it is again, upon me. I am desolate and afflicted. The troubles of my heart are enlarged. Bring me out of my distresses. Look upon my affliction and my pain, and forgive all my sins. Consider my enemies, for they are many, and they hate me with a cruel hatred. Oh, keep my soul and deliver me. Let me not be ashamed, for I put my trust in thee. Let integrity and uprightness preserve me, for I wait on thee. Redeem Israel, O God, out of all his troubles. I just hope you can hear the tone there of David. He's asking for deliverance, but he's also confessing and needing God's forgiveness. So it's a psalm of much depth, and we can only imagine the king thinking about his son and all the political intrigue that was going on at the time, and yet he turns his face up to God and seeks the Lord to vindicate and to validate him as the king. Psalm 26, let's call this a psalm of confession and confidence. Now, hold your finger there and turn back to 2 Samuel 21. I want you to see the background of this psalm. 2 Samuel 21. In the previous psalm, David was suffering from the consequences of his own actions or lack of action. But in this psalm, the backdrop of this psalm is he's suffering because of the consequences of someone else's actions. Something he had absolutely nothing to do with. That's what I want you to see. And I think in a real sense, for some of us, it may be more difficult to suffer, to be patient, to put up with, to tolerate, to pray through the consequences that fall on us when somebody else does something, someone we love. And yet we, because we love them, they're our spouse, they're in our family, they're a friend, whatever. I think about a lot of people that go through family members with addictions or things like this. You know, you love them and you hate them. You know, you want to save them and you want to kill them because they'll go along real good and you're trying to help them and you're believing the best for them, then they'll fall off the wagon or they'll do something really weird and it burns you and the consequences. So in 2 Samuel 21, let me get there now that I'm done talking about that. 2 Samuel 21. There was a famine in the days of David 3 years, year after year. So there's a 3-year famine. We're not told it was how great a famine it was, but it was enough that it was noticeable. So 1 year, everybody feels like, well, next year crop will be better. Things will be better. Things are going to get better. 2 years, well, next year to get better. 3 years. So in the 3rd year, David inquired of the Lord. Let's ask God about this. I think I'd ask him the 1st year, but anyway. And the Lord answered, it is for Saul and for his bloody house, because he slew the Gibeonites. Now, this is something that happened almost 30 years prior. David, again, he's close to 60 now, in that range, and I'm kind of broad with my numbers here. But this is something that happened very early in the reign of Saul, and Saul didn't reign all that long, about 13 years. And yet it's taken all that time for the chickens to come home to roost, as the old preachers down south said. Now, I don't understand that. Now, something that somebody did 30 years ago, now the consequences are showing up. I think it shows us that, at least me, that we maybe don't see sin quite the way God sees sin. I think sometimes we think, well, it's not that bad, whatever I did or whatever she did or whatever they said. But God has a totally different view of sin. He even says the wages of sin is death. Pretty strong. And so sin has within it death. It has slow, agonizing sort of, it's like poison in a cup. You can just take a sip and it may not hurt you, but over time, a sip and a sip and a sip will accumulate. So that's what's going on here in Psalm 26. David's trying to find out why we've had 3 years of famine, and God says it's for Saul. What Saul did. And I'm surprised David doesn't say something like, well, that's not fair. I didn't do that. It's not my fault. But he's the king. And so if you continue reading chapter 21, I won't continue reading that, but David does certain things and makes everything right. So in the process, he writes this psalm, Psalm 26, which is a psalm addressing how I handle the consequences of the actions of others when they invade my life, when they come into my space. How do I handle that? Psalm 26. First, David says, judge me, O Lord, for I have walked in my integrity. as if to say, that was Saul, not me. I have walked in my integrity. I have trusted also in the Lord. Therefore, I shall not slide. Verse 2, he says, examine me. Examine me, O Lord, and prove me. Try my reins and my heart. For thy loving kindness is before mine eyes, and I have walked in your truth. So he says, judge me. He says, examine me. And he says, look at my outer life, my lifestyle. Verse 4, I've not sat with vain persons, neither will I go in with dissemblers. I have hated the congregation of evildoers. I will not sit with the wicked. I will wash my hands in innocency. So will I surround your altar, O Lord, that I may publish with the voice of thanksgiving and tell of all thy wondrous works. So he says, Lord, judge me, examine me, look at my lifestyle, how I do, what I do. That's the outer life. Then verse 8 is the inner life that only God could see. Lord, I have loved the habitation of thy house and the place where thine honor dwells. Verse 9 through 12, the future life, what's beyond. Again, he's coming out of this situation, 3 years famine. He finds out what the problem is. 2 Samuel 21, he deals with the problem. It's kind of a strange way, kind of a harsh way they deal with it, but they deal with it. God's satisfied, so he knows there's a future. Verse 9, gather not my soul with sinners, nor my life with bloody men, in whose hands is mischief, and their right hand is full of bribes. But as for me, I will walk in mine integrity. Redeem me and be merciful unto me. My foot stands in an even place in the congregations. Will I bless the Lord? So again, a lot of these Psalms start out with, Lord, what's the problem? What, woe is me, help me. And it winds up with worship and rejoicing in the fact that God is going to answer and he's going to deliver. And like I said, if you read 2 Samuel 21, he did. Psalm 27. Let's call this God's light for dark times. Occasionally, every once in a while, if you live long enough, you go through a dark time. You go through a dry time, a difficult time, challenging time. And it just seems like there's no light. And yet God's light shines even in the dark times. That's what this is all about. So each one of these sections, we're just going to use one word as the outline, and they all start with letter P. I'm doing that for Allison tonight. She likes all those P's, so I'm going to put all that together. By the way, her middle name starts with a P, too. First, there's praise, verses 1 through 3. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When the wicked, even my enemies and my foes, come upon me to eat up my flesh, they stumbled and fell. Though an army should encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Though war should rise against me, in this will I be confident. So praise to God who is the light, even in the darkest times. Verse 4, priority. Priority. One thing have I desired of the Lord. That will I seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in his temple. What's that? Worship. Worship. David says, my priority is worship. Now he's talking about organized or structured worship there. By the way, last week, if you were here, I said, if I remember right, David's choir had 288 singers. You remember that? I was right. I looked it up. So when I went to one of my Old Testament books, scholars didn't know if it's 288 singers or 288 orchestra or 288 singers and orchestra. But most of them believe it's 288 singers. So David believed in structured worship, but David was one of these kind of people who could worship just as easily sitting out on a rock looking up at the starry night. You know, like we saw in Psalm 8. The heavens declare the glory of God. The earth shows forth his handiwork. But when you study the life of David as king, his two major accomplishments. One was, of course, getting all the material ready for the temple, which Solomon built, but David got all the stuff together. And the second thing was David actually organized the entire worship structure of the nation of Israel. All of the singers and all of the musicians and all of the structure of it. And it's quite interesting to look at that. And like Moses was given the pattern to the tabernacle, and Solomon was given the blueprints to the temple, but God never gave David any kind of design for worship. It all came out of his heart. And that's part of who David was. So one thing he says I've desired, that to seek after the Lord and dwell in his house forever, to behold the beauty of the Lord, to inquire his temple. It's the priority of worship. We can do many things after we worship, but hardly anything until we do worship. And truly worship the Lord, whether it's first thing in the morning with your cup of coffee and your Bible, a little notepad, if you're reading through the Bible, and it's the time of prayer, your prayer list, whatever, or you take a walk sometime through the day and you just enjoy the beautiful weather and you thank God for that, or so worship service like this, or whatever the case is. Worship is the fuel for mission in the church. God's called us to be on mission, to reach people, to make disciples, to minister to people. But it's worship, gathered worship and individual worship, that becomes the actual fuel that propels us, gives us that confidence. Like David says here, the Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? I mean, you can't hardly read that being confident. And so we need worship. Different structures, different times, different gatherings, whether it's in a church building, whether it's in a home setting. We've done all kinds of things down through the years, but worship is the fuel for everything else. So important. So he said, that's my priority. Jesus would say, Matthew 6:33, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these other things will be added unto. So a priority is verse 4. And then he talks about protection, verse 5. For in the time of trouble, he shall hide me in his pavilion. In the secret of his tabernacle, he shall hide me. He shall set me up upon a rock. David was speaking from experience. He'd had a lot of situations where he'd been hunted by Saul and been in situations where just life or death, this way, that way. So he knew what he was talking about when he talked about God's protection, his divine protection, his divine sovereign protection. Then verse 6, 7, and 8, the word is promise. Promise. And now shall my head be lifted up above mine enemies round about me. Therefore I will offer in his tabernacle sacrifices of joy. I will sing, yea, I will sing praises unto the Lord. Hear, O Lord, when I cry with my voice. Have mercy also upon me and answer me. When you said, seek ye my face, my heart said to you, thy face, Lord, will I seek. I like that. I like that. When you said, seek my face, my heart said, your face will I see. I like that quite a bit. So, promises. And then he has a petition, verses 9 through 13. It is a prayer. Hide not your face far from me. Put not your servant away in anger. You have been my help. Leave me not, neither forsake me, O God of my salvation. When my father and my mother forsake me, the Lord will take me up. Teach me thy way, O Lord. Lead me in a plain path because of mine enemies. Deliver me not over unto the will of mine enemies, for false witnesses are risen up against me, and such as breathe out cruelly. I had fainted unless I had believed to see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. The word on verse 14 is position. That's the P word there. Wait. That's the position. Wait on the Lord. Be of good courage. He shall strengthen your heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord. That's the position God often puts us in when we're going through dark times, when we find ourselves in dark places, places of uncertainty and challenge. He'll cause us to wait. It's the last thing we want to do most all the time, but especially when we're going through dark stuff. We want to find the light. We want to run to safety. We want to fix it. We want to do something. And yet David had learned the position for dark, difficult days is to wait. And a lot of times when I find myself in a situation like this, I don't really have as much trouble waiting on the Lord as I have ignoring people who want to give me advice. I say, you know what you need to do? You know what you ought to do? Here, if I was you, here's what I would do. And so if you're trying to be quiet, wait on the Lord. Somebody will come along with good intention most of the time and tell you what you ought to be doing. When it's taken all the spiritual stamina you got just to be quiet and to wait. That's the position. Now there's one more P that wasn't in here. Did you find out what it was? Pride. You don't see any pride in this prayer. Nothing boastful, nothing cocky, nothing arrogant, because David's in a dark place. He's humbling himself before God and waiting upon the Lord. And sometimes we get proud. Sometimes we get a little highfalutin, like Ricky Skaggs used to sing, we get above our raisin. And a dark time can sometimes be a quiet time too. And it gives us time to sort of consider and be introspective without being overly analytical and isolationist in our pursuit of life, but allows us to reflect and humble ourselves if we need to, without further influence from the Lord. You know, if we don't humble ourselves in the dark times, in the difficult times, he has ways to humble us. And many times when I humble myself before the Lord, I'll say, Lord, here I am. I'm going to humble myself. Please don't humiliate me. I'll be humble. Don't humiliate me. And teach me what I need to know. And he's very good to do just that. So God's light in dark times. Psalm 28. A very basic prayer is just all this is. There's really nothing complex about it. And there are several psalms like this. It's just what we might call vanilla prayer. You know, there's nothing fancy about it. It's just coming to God and talking to him. Psalm 28, unto thee will I cry, O Lord, my rock. Be not silent to me. If you be silent to me, I become like them that go down into the pit. And of course, he's speaking of the afterlife. That place called Sheol in Hebrew, the place of departed spirits. Hear the voice of my supplications when I cry unto thee, when I lift up my hands toward thy holy oracle. David was a hand lifter. Remember, we said very early in this study that when the book of Psalms talks about lifting your hands to the Lord, that was their symbolic way of lifting their heart. So when a Hebrew worshiper would lift his hands, it was symbolizing, I can't take my heart out, so I'll reach up with my hands as high as I can. That's the idea. So I imagine David and standing and bowing and other prostrate positions. He probably held his hands up quite a bit. Draw me not away with the wicked and with the workers of iniquity, which speak peace to their neighbors, but mischief is in their hearts. Give them according to their deeds and according to the wickedness of their endeavors. Give them after the work of their hands. Render to them their desert. Almost said dessert. Because they regard not the works of the Lord, nor the operation of his hands, he shall destroy them and not build them up. Blessed be the Lord, because he's heard the voice of my supplications. The Lord is my strength and my shield. My heart trusted in him, and I am helped. Therefore, my heart greatly rejoices, and with my song I will praise him. So it's just a personal prayer. And then he prays a little bit for the nation. Now, he's the king again, verse 8 and 9. The Lord is their strength, and he is the saving strength of his anointed. Save thy people. Bless thine inheritance. Feed them also and lift them up. forever. So you got the king interceding for the nation, for the people, after his own personal time of prayer. Psalm 29. Now, we can actually see in this psalm the musical arrangement. We have verse 1 and 2 is like introduction, call to worship. And then verse 10 and 11 is conclusion, a response to worship. And I'll show you how that works in just a minute. In between, we have the body of the hymn or the chorus or the song. And if you look at verse 3, verse 4 twice, verse 5, verse 7, verse 8, verse 9, what would you call the title of this song? The voice of the Lord. So verse 1 and 2, again, is the introduction. It's a call to worship. Verse 10 and 11 is the conclusion. It's a response to worship. And then in between is the actual hymn or the song. Give unto the Lord, O ye mighty. Give unto the Lord glory and strength. Give unto the Lord the glory due unto his name. Worship the Lord in the beauty of holiness. So worship is a giving. We give of ourselves, whether it's our presence here tonight, gathering together. We've given up of our time. We've given up of maybe something else to be here. We sing. We give that offering of praise. Sometimes in worship we have offerings of money. We give. Sometimes people give of their talents. Allison played the piano tonight wonderfully. Thank you. And Greg's back there on the dial. Sam's got the internet happening here. So people are giving. All that is an expression of worship. We give. And that puts worship in a whole different light. So he says, give unto the Lord. Give unto the Lord. Give unto the Lord. And then he talks about the voice of the Lord. And Lord, again, is in all caps, Jehovah. So it's the covenant name of God. So worship, the giving of worship, is an expression of the fact that he's my Savior, he's my God, he's redeemed me. I'm in a relationship with him, and I want to give him my very best. I want to give him all I've got, whatever that may be. So the voice of the Lord is upon the waters. The God of glory thunders. The Lord is upon many waters. The voice of the Lord is powerful. The voice of the Lord is full of majesty. The voice of the Lord breaks the cedars. Yea, the Lord breaks the cedars of Lebanon. He makes them also to skip like a calf. Lebanon and Syrian like a young unicorn or an ox, if you have a newer version. The voice of the Lord divides the flames of fire. The voice of the Lord shakes the wilderness. The Lord shakes the wilderness of Kadesh. The voice of the Lord makes the hinds to calve and discovers the forest. In his temple doth every one speak of his glory. The Lord sits upon the flood. Yea, the Lord sits king forever. The Lord will give strength unto his people. The Lord will bless his people.